seats. The program is about to begin.
Every day, every single day, things are happening in the world of deals and deal makers. And there's never enough time to keep up with every company, transaction, announcement, or whatever. It's just exhausting. And we have a new product to help fix that. This is Axios Pro Deals, a new premium subscription product bringing you tailor-made insights like never before. For the last 5 years, Axios has helped deal professionals navigate the whole deal landscape with Pro Rata. With Axios Pro Deals, we're diving deeper into the industries that matter most to you. You just want stories on fintech? There's a newsletter for that. MedTech deals? We've got you covered. The future of retail? We'll guide you. With Axios Pro Deals, you're going to be getting all of this industry-specific insight and expert analysis at a level you simply can't get anywhere else. So if you're a venture capitalist, private equity investor, banker, trader, founder, executive, anyone who cares about deals, Axios Pro is what you need to help you understand what matters and why. Start your free trial today at AxiosPro.com.
welcome aboard.
Please welcome to the stage Axios local Dallas reporter Michael Mooney.
Hi there, what a good-looking crowd. I'm Mike Mooney. I am one of the co-authors of the Axios Dallas newsletter. I'm going to say this a couple of times today, but if you're not subscribed to the Axios Dallas newsletter, you absolutely need to be. You should today. And everybody else already knows what a great newsletter we have. I'm so glad that we have this crowd for our first Axios Dallas event. Today we're going to be talking about housing affordability. If you're following along virtually, you can use the hashtag Axios Events. Without further ado, I want to introduce our first guest. He's the City of Dallas's Director of Housing and Neighborhood Revitalization. Please welcome to the stage, David Noguera. Let's do this. All right. So we're talking about housing affordability. Let's set the table. What's the situation look like in Dallas or in North Texas for people who don't know?
Good question. So right now, it really comes down to supply and demand. We can't build housing fast enough to meet the demand. As a result, what you're seeing is that those at the higher end of the income spectrum can afford whatever the rents or sales prices may be, and those at the medium, moderate, and lower incomes are in what I would call a domino effect, where there's a race to the bottom to swoop up whatever units are available. As a result, those who aren't able to find units end up either in overcrowding situations, living with family members, or moving to the outer rings of the outer suburbs where they can find affordability, or some give up altogether and leave the region because it's just not there for them. Yeah.
Let's talk about the year 2033. Dallas Housing Policy 2033. What does the year 2033 mean to you, and what is that policy?
So for me, it's really our goal, right? It's the next 10 years. What do you want to accomplish? This new housing policy that the Dallas City Council just adopted is really focused on developing housing and developing communities in a targeted manner. But not just in a targeted manner, taking the expertise of those who work in the housing sector and understand the dynamics of housing, and listening to the residents who are living in these areas, trying to figure out how do we take our capabilities and match them with those who need it most, so that we can figure out where do we need to be building the future high opportunity areas. You hear so many folks talk about we need affordability in high opportunity areas. The reality is in Dallas, we don't have enough high opportunity areas. And those that we do have are built out, and any land that's available is at the higher end of the spectrum. So we've got to figure out how do we build new high opportunity areas, improving the quality of life for those residents that already live there, bringing services and housing stock for market rate residents who are not currently interested in living in those areas, and figuring out from a long-term perspective, if we're successful in doing all of these things, how do we preserve affordability? Whether it be through deed restrictions, through tools like community land trusts, or any other innovative products that may come online so that we can sustain mixed income communities.
Why is it called 2033? What's the goal of 2033?
It's 10 years from now.
What would you like this region to look like 10 years from now?
Good question. I think that's really a question for the residents who are from here, who live in these communities. From my perspective, we have to accommodate those that are here in Dallas and those that are coming to Dallas. Dallas needs to be a home for everyone. And we've got to make sure that we're taking an intentional approach to development so that if you've lived here for generations, you can continue to find opportunities to continue living here. And if you're new to the area, there are opportunities for you to find housing as well. And our hope is that regardless of the income class, that they can live in the same communities, interact with one another, go to the same schools, benefit from the same retail services and job centers. So it's really about building those mixed income communities.
These are the kind of issues that are, communities all across the country are facing housing affordability issues. What makes North Texas different?
Good question. In some respects, we're not that different. North Texas, Dallas is struggling with the same affordability challenges that other major cities around the country are dealing with. I think the difference that I'm seeing is we're not totally built out. We still have green land to develop. We still have infill opportunities. City of Dallas is looking at building out Hensley Field, which is going to be a community. It's some 750 acres, the size of downtown Dallas, right? How many built-out cities can say they have those opportunities? So the question for us is not just, do we have the opportunities? Will we be strategic enough to develop them for all residents across that income spectrum? Time will tell.
What keeps you up at night? What are the problems that you're thinking about when your head hits the pillow?
Good question. So on a daily basis, I am confronted with challenges from residents who either cannot afford to repair their homes or cannot afford to find housing, or developers that can't meet their goals for one reason or another. So what's often keeping me up is figuring out how do we serve them all, right? Because clearly there aren't enough resources to go around for everyone, but we want to make sure that we maximize the efficiency of those resources that we do have.
How do you do that?
So I talked to you before about targeting and the importance of targeting. That's what you're seeing. That's probably the most important theme coming through the Dallas Housing Policy 2033. We start with the programs and the financial resources that we already have, and we start to channel those resources into those targeted areas. Then we look at the other city departments, and we look at what their priorities are, and we figure out, okay, which ones are appropriate to align with our target areas. Then we go outside of the city, and we look at our partners from the school districts to the housing authority, to DART, to the lending community, and we figure out how do we start to establish partnerships with them so that they can start to direct their resources to those target areas. That is how we're going to be able to start turning the dial on redevelopment. It's not going to be any one project, any one investment. It's going to be it's going to happen through all of these entities in actively investing in this targeted manner.
Sounds like a mindset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to change.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about the fact that Dallas has land, right? We have space. North Texas does not have the geographic boundaries that so many other regions have. We don't have mountains. We don't have oceans stopping us. We have Oklahoma. Nobody wants to go there. But that's still, we're still pretty far. What are the other opportunities? Aside from the sheer space that we have, what are the other opportunities that we have in North Texas that you'd like to take advantage of?
So we are one of the largest job centers. We actively have Fortune 500 companies moving to North Texas. And with those jobs come people. The question is, how many of those jobs are being filled by locals, by folks who have called Dallas home for generations? How many of those jobs are being filled by lower income households? We know that Child Poverty Action Lab just came out with a report that shows 40% of our workforce earn less than $40,000 a year. So we've got to figure out, okay, if that's who our workforce is, how are we housing them? So it's a continuous focus that we have to make on serving these different populations. And from my perspective, from a housing perspective.
Let's talk about neighborhoods. Where do you live, and what do you like about your neighborhood? And what would you like to improve? What neighborhood would you like to improve on?
So Dallas is a city of 380 square miles. There's a lot of neighborhoods that need improvement. I personally live in far north Dallas. It's a beautiful community, surrounded with good schools, parks, retail services. But when I first got here, I lived in Farmers Market. And it's an area that I still frequent to this day, just because of the vibrancy of the area. When I'm not working, I love to hang out at the Cedar Crest Golf Course or the Ron Kirk pedestrian bridge. My kids love that area. I think wherever you go in this city, you can find some gems that really stand out. And our job as city officials is to figure out how to capitalize on them, to bring investments to those areas, and to encourage folks who live here to want to stay.
Anything that we did not cover in our smart brevity conversation that you think is important to share with this audience?
The work that we do does not just come down to dollars and cents, all right? In many respects, I would say dollars and cents is the easiest part. The biggest challenge that we face, particularly from an affordable housing perspective, is NIMBYism, right? Those who are not interested in the word affordable housing, in anything that looks like it. So one of the biggest investments that I think we need to be making in the coming years is building YIMBYism, yes in my backyard, helping folks understand who are these people that we're serving, what are the professions that they come from, how will that impact my property values, and why should I be interested in supporting those efforts.
How do you change the mindsets? How do you change people's outlook?
I think a lot of it stems from relationship building, right? You support those who you know. And I live in an area that's pretty conservative, but too often I end up in conversations about housing and public safety, and I think a lot of the headway that I've been able to have is just having conversations on who am I, what are we doing, what am I doing, and I think those conversations need to continue to happen across the demographics spectrum.
Yeah. David, we're out of time, but thank you so much for the excellent insights. I really appreciate the conversation.
Appreciate it.
Let's do it.
Introducing Axios real estate reporter Sammy Sparberg.
Hello, good afternoon. My name's Sammy Sparber, and I'm a real estate reporter at Axios, and I'm so excited to be here in Dallas with y'all. Our next guest is a leading voice in housing, real estate, and trends here in North Texas. Please welcome to the stage the Real Estate Council President and CEO, Linda McMahon. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to.
I would love to start with some Econ 101.
Sure.
Walk us through some of the economic forces shaping affordability in North Texas.
We have a lot of issues that are really impacting affordability. Obviously, the economic markets right now are impacting what people can afford. Construction costs are really high. There's a lot of impediments to cost of infrastructure. One of the biggest impediments in Dallas, particularly in southern Dallas, is the lack of investment in infrastructure. And when a developer is looking to build housing, they're going to have to pay for that infrastructure, put sidewalks and streets and lights and wet water and wastewater, and that's expensive. And so if you're talking about creating affordable housing, you really have to be talking about what's the total cost of that. And that includes a major investment that needs to be made in infrastructure, particularly in southern Dallas, where there is either lacking infrastructure or it's so old and crumbling that it's not capable of being able to handle a modern home or an apartment building.
Well, you've worked on these issues all across the state. What is something that people get wrong about what's happening in North Texas?
I'm not sure I know what they get wrong about North Texas. Obviously, this is the best place to be in the state of Texas, and for a lot of different things. The fact that we have such a diverse economy, so many different industries in this area, really provides an economic stability that a lot of people don't see. We don't have the fluctuations of an economy like Houston does with the concentration of the oil and gas business. But I think there is this perception that Dallas includes all of these areas way outside of Dallas. Dallas Cowboys are in Arlington. So, got to think about that. People want to claim this, but the reality is there's a lot more people that live outside of Dallas than they actually do live within the city of Dallas.
Right. And when you're looking out at the lay of the land, where are you seeing headwinds and potential solutions?
Well, the headwinds, frankly, in a lot of cases is political will. And it's also a big problem with neighborhood opposition, people misunderstanding what is housing that's affordable for all people that live in this neighborhood. And whenever they hear the phrase affordable housing, they automatically think homeless housing, low-income housing. But as David Nagora pointed out, when you have an average income in the city of Dallas of $40,000 a year, those are our essential workers, and they need to be housed. And so I think the issue is there needs to be some marketing, so to speak, or some changes in the mindset around what really is affordable housing, and it really benefits all of us. And our organization has always been a big proponent of mixed income housing. We think a neighborhood is healthier if it has a variety of income levels within that neighborhood. So concentrations of any kind, high income and low income, are really bad, I think, in terms of what we see and has been proven in school performance for kids and all different kinds of other socioeconomic issues that we all face.
And speaking of political will, this year, real estate was a big talker at the legislature, but ultimately the proposals to build more homes failed. What is your take on what lawmakers did, or rather didn't get done this year?
I think the challenge we have in Texas is that the majority of the noise, or I should say noise, that's probably not appropriate or politically correct, is that the focus is on areas that are not urban Texas. And the majority of people that live in the state are living in urban areas. And there needs to be a focus in really providing support for those urban areas and having that be a priority. One of the things that our organization has a very strong feeling about is Each city should be able to define their own future in terms of what kinds of regulations and policies there are. However, when political will locally doesn't allow you the ability to make some changes that could help develop, then we're going to be interested in looking at those from a holistic perspective and looking at them statewide. The years ago in the early 90s, there was a lot more building of housing that was multi-unit, not necessarily high-rise 300-unit apartment complexes, but there were a lot of duplexes, triplexes. That was a predominant product type in the early 90s. We haven't seen that type of development, that small-scale development, and having multifamily, not 300 units or high-rises, but multifamily within a residential context is really, really important. And increasing density is really essential to the health of urban Texans. And so I think to the extent our North Texas legislative team did a great job as best as they could. But when the overriding attitude is really about other areas other than urban areas in the state, that's a big impediment for us.
And on the topic of increasing density in our communities, how do you get people to make that mindset shift when the concept of the single-family home is so deeply entrenched with our view of the American dream?
Well, the majority of the city of Dallas is zoned for single-family residential. I know that may be surprising, but it's true. And so zoning is a big issue and a big impediment to building more housing. How do you shift the mindset? The American dream is a two-car garage and rear entry in some cases in a residential neighborhood, single family. That's what people want. And I sit on a planning committee for the city of Dallas, and when you're talking to people in all types of neighborhoods, particularly those who've really battled hard to get their homes and really maintain that as being their castle in a lot of ways, and that way of wealth building, they're protective of their neighborhood, and they want to make sure that they protect what they see as success. And so, unfortunately, within these neighborhoods, they do reject ideas about adding more density. They also reject adding accessory dwelling units, or granny flats as people like to call them. But that additional ability to provide housing throughout the community and the neighborhoods, within the neighborhoods, is really, really important. So it's a battle on every single front, politically and in the neighborhoods. And it's just about a perception that that is a bad thing. But frankly, for us to be able to provide the housing that's absolutely essential for the growth of this city, we're going to have to embrace more density.
So it sounds like the political will is a key part of the recipe here. Where have you seen it, or where are you seeing it right now?
Well, I think the city is trying to do the best it can with the resources it has. I mean, there's no panacea, there's no silver bullet. We have been very fortunate in our organization to be able to do a lot of different things, innovative things in terms of housing and funding for housing. And I see my friend Michelle Thomas with JP Morgan. They made a $6 million investment in our organization several years ago that helped us provide funding for housing in these, particularly in low-income communities. But we also were able to create the Dallas Housing Opportunity Fund, which is the first fund of its kind in the state of Texas. And the initial funding was a $6 million investment from the city of Dallas. And that $6 million investment is meant to spur other investment. And so far we've raised almost $25 million. We need to raise a lot more. And frankly, because of the economic environment, we have been deploying this money faster than we can actually raise it. So there's a lot of desire and need to build, but the capital constraints of financial institutions and investors is really hampering that. So we've got the headwind of the economic situation that's really hampering building affordable housing, because housing is expensive, construction is expensive, and to the point you and I talked about this a little bit, if you look at the average price for housing in 2022 in the city of Dallas, it was over $500,000 for an average home. Austin was well over $600,000. Houston was less than us at 400, and San Antonio even less at 370. So at $370,000, a person who's making $40,000 a year cannot afford that. And the cost for maintaining a single-family home is significantly higher than living in a rental apartment. And so that building of multifamily, regardless of type, is really, really, really important, because I don't know a lot of people that can afford $500,000 for their home.
So some of these solutions that you brought up have been talked about going on years now, and even gotten some favorable attention from officials. But what is different about this current situation? Like, why was it talked about so much more at the legislature this year than in previous years?
Well, when you have billions and billions of dollars of excess money sitting in the bank at the state of Texas Treasury, people are always trying to figure out how to spend it. Real estate was a big topic this year on a lot of different fronts, and we were more active in our political work in Austin this year than we've ever been. So it wasn't just about housing, it was about real estate in general. You know, Dallas has got a really vibrant commercial real estate market, which we're very grateful for, and a lot of our members are really engaged in building all these beautiful buildings that you see. But we really feel like, from a business perspective, the most important thing we can contribute to the community is to be able to provide more housing, and to provide that housing for the workers that are working for us. And I think that awareness is starting to become more prevalent in the business community, because it's not just a problem in low-income communities, it's a problem for actually economic growth and economic development in our region.
And how would you characterize housing policies that draw broad support from the business community?
I think they're just starting to realize that these are all important issues for them. We have had a lot more interest in talking about the challenges of housing and all the things associated with the fact that you don't have housing, or you don't have quality housing. So I think there's an awful lot more awareness around that now, but we haven't quite got to the tipping point that it's made a difference yet.
And to what extent is the affordability issues and the local housing market impacting the region's ability to attract new businesses?
Well, luckily, we haven't really that hasn't been an impediment, but even for the communities that are thriving outside of the city of Dallas, like Frisco, they're having trouble getting workers because there's no housing for people to live close to their jobs. And so I think from a regional perspective, it is a universal issue in providing affordable housing. So we're going to continue working on that in every way we can by trying to bring innovative solutions like the Housing Fund. The other initiative we're working on are community land trusts, which are very, very important, and that's a shared equity model that Dallas has not really implemented yet. And then really figuring out what kind of property tax interventions we can have, because we actually mapped the city of Dallas, and the areas that had the highest increase in property valuation were majority low-income communities. And so while gentrification is something that is part of a growing economy, it's something that we are trying to manage in a smart way to maintain opportunities for people to live in their communities and provide that stable neighborhood that they want, in addition to having more people move into those communities. But again, infrastructure investment is going to be critical to that. Zoning is going to be critical to that. All kinds of reforms that need to happen from a local perspective are all important.
Well, it wouldn't not be an Axios event if we didn't end on one fun thing.
Okay.
So I'm based in Austin. You spend a lot of time in Austin. Help us settle the debate. Which city has the better food?
Oh, Dallas. No question.
Why?
Everyone who's in this room that knows me knows that that's what I do, is I dine. And wherever I go, I always find the best restaurants I can dine at. And I was recently in Austin and had some good experiences, but nothing compares to our local restaurant scene in Dallas.
Well, we can agree to disagree, but what's your favorite Dallas restaurant?
I have so many, I can't even begin to tell you, but probably one that I go to more frequently than others is a Italian restaurant called Nona. Small little neighborhood restaurant, really great food.
Sounds like there's some fans of it in the audience. Well, thank
Highly
you so much.
recommend the lobster ravioli.
Everyone write that down. Okay. Well, I think that's just about it for us today, but thank you so
Sam.
much for joining
Axios.
Axios.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Up next, our View from the Top moderator and Axios' General Manager of Global, National, and Local Events, John Otto.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. These programs are not made possible without the support of our sponsors, and so I want to give a big thanks to the American Property Owners Alliance for being with us here today and making it possible. I'm excited to introduce the next segment, which is our View from the Top program. Please give a warm welcome to the Executive Director of the Alliance, Colin Allen.
John, good to see you.
Likewise.
Thanks for that introduction. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and hope as the Executive Director of the American Property Owners Alliance, hope that I can speak to this security and stability that the 85 million plus American homeowners enjoy and kind of what homeownership represents to those who'd like to enjoy homeownership. I'd also like to take a minute, if you'd indulge me, to recognize one of our board members here, Marvin Jolly, who's the American Property Owners Alliance Secretary, local to Plano and able to join us in person. Look forward to our conversation here. Thanks.
Likewise. And the backdrop, June is National Homeownership Month. So with that in mind, love to just have you introduce a little bit more about the Alliance and your role there and the purpose that it serves.
Sure. No, again, as the Executive Director, glad to join you here during National Homeownership Month. Again, I think one of the things that we're really here to talk about is homeownership, kind of maintaining its position as the American dream. I really think that is important, and it maintains that place in America because homeownership represents independence, financial stability. Really owners take pride in their homes, right? And that's reflected in their communities. And you see that there. And then you're able to build generational wealth, right? This is something that you can enjoy as an owner, but it's also something that benefits your family further on down the line.
Mm-hmm. We've heard a little bit already, and I think we want to talk a little bit more just around increasing opportunities for home ownership generally. It often comes down to supply, as we've heard. Limited supply will contribute to higher prices. And so we'd love to hear a little bit more about how do we adjust that? How do we help with the supply side to alleviate some of the upward pressure on pricing?
Yeah, thanks. No, I mean, we're here in the midst of what's a historic supply crisis, right? We're underbuilt by somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 million units over the last couple of decades. Supply on the market, homes for sale has declined by about 39%. Here over the last since 2019, really as we're getting in and looking at this, where Dallas is I think kind of emblematic of a lot of the things that you see there. And we're moving forward with solutions to take a look at this. I think some of the things that we could look at on the legislative side, really taking a look at the Neighborhood Homes Investment is one of the Investment Act is one of the programs that we could bring in, and would bring in 500,000 new moderately priced homes that are accessible to first-time buyers in the market. Looking at things like streamlining and kind of modernizing density. I think it's been talked about by a couple of our panelists here. That's another issue that we could look at, and creating incentives at the federal level to allow local governments to do that. I think are a couple of the big issues that we'd want to see.
We were talking a little bit backstage about just the dynamics of the rental market and the impact that has on home ownership. Would love to just hear a little bit more, like what's the data telling you there, how to look at it there from a purchasing side.
On the rental side,
rental market,
right?
Yeah, the impact that has.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what we look at, right, is the rental market is really, we look at the ownership as kind of a ladder, right? You want to look at how do you get folks in and get them in a position to where they're able to save and build their credit and kind of get up that ladder, right? And a lot of times that begins with an affordable rental property. One of the things that we've also looked at, again, national policy solutions here, is increasing the low-income housing tax credit, right? This is something that would encourage local governments to build more and to rehabilitate affordable rental units. So I think getting people in and giving them the ability to build that credit and to save. I think one of the things that we see as from the larger perspective, right, when we're talking to first-time buyers, is that people say, access to credit's an issue for me, and then the ability to save for that down payment. Those are two crucial things, and the ability to get there is going to be built on being able to afford that first rental. Again, I think where a lot of the other panelists have talked about, this provides some breathing room. Provide that with some credit counseling and education, right? Like letting people understand and providing the resources to folks to understand how to build credit, how to manage debt, and then again, having it fit in there in a way that you're able to save is actually a really huge piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. So we've heard already, right? The Dallas-Fort Worth region has really exploded in growth, both in terms of new businesses, but also in residents relocating. It comes back to affordability. I would love your perspective on how to address that affordability challenge in a market like this.
Yeah, again, on this affordability side, right? We're looking at kind of we're at a historic kind of crux, right? I think Dallas has been rated as one of the top 25 most unaffordable cities to live in. Axios just yesterday published an article here in the local Dallas portion about the vast majority of Dallas prospective buyers would be more better off renting than buying, or it's more affordable to rent than to buy. So I think looking at those kinds of things is really where we would go, and then looking at again, I think we talked a little bit about access to credit and saving for a down payment. Things that you would want to do here, looking at potential assistance to first-time buyers, right? And one of the things that you're seeing here that you could combine it with is we've heard this issue of the golden handcuffs, right? I think it's been something that as we're talking about interest rates are both pricing folks out and locking people in who may want to move, right? What you could do is provide some incentive to help a first-time home buyer, but also that person who's locked in with or not locked in, but has an attractive mortgage rate in the 2s or 3s, but may have to pay 6 or 7% to move. Is there some incentive that would, if they're in a property that doesn't quite fit their needs, is there a little bit that helps them sell to a first-time buyer?
Right. So 2/3 of Americans do own their home right now. However, the percent difference between white and black American homeowners represents the largest home ownership rate gap in at least a decade. What can be done to close that gap and ensure black Americans and other groups are in a place to really take advantage of the home ownership benefits that we've described?
Yeah, and as you noted there, right, that 65% represents a gap of about, for black Americans, it's about a 44% ownership rate, and for white Americans, it's about 73%. And those numbers have been, while the home ownership rate for black Americans has been pretty steady over the last few years, it's seen nominal gains in white Americans, Latino and Asian homeowners as well. So, I think the things that we're doing at the Alliance and that we look to do would be to, partnership with historically black colleges and universities, faith-based institutions, and community leaders to get out and provide some of the financial education and assistance that I talked about. The other issue is looking at alternative forms of credit scoring, right? Things that give you credit for, a lot of people will look at their credit score and say, look, I only get penalized for the bad things I did, right? Taking a look at things like getting credit for on-time bill payments and rental payments. These are kind of things that you could look at. And then finally, right, it's just enforcement of the fair housing laws. I think there was some announcement last week from the federal task force looking at appraisals, right? There's documented bias in appraisals. So moving forward to make sure that automated valuation models and don't take into account historic patterns of discrimination there, and bring in more folks of color into the appraisal profession are two things that would be really important and are, I think, encouraging signs here recently.
Mm-hmm. You brought up to me home equity theft as a topic, and if we look at through the legislative and regulatory lens, like would love your perspective on that angle in particular, on like what policies are working, what policies aren't, from the national and local levels.
Yeah, so I'm going to steal a phrase from my 6-year-old. Let me tell you something. Would you believe that up until May 25th, this policy that we call home equity theft, say you get behind on your property taxes. Very specifically, there was a 94-year-old grandmother in Minneapolis or in Minnesota who fell behind on her property taxes because she had to move into assisted living and is on a fixed income. County foreclosed on her for a $15,000 tax debt, sold her home for $40,000, and kept the remaining $25,000. The county was able to do that. It was legal in the state. We supported her case to the Supreme Court, and just on the 25th of May, got a 9-0 decision in favor of the property owner there that this represented a government taking that's unconstitutional. So now we'll be moving to, I think, a lot of the states to correct this and figure out what are the next steps. But it's a huge win for a court that is not typically united on a lot of things. To get a 9-0 verdict out of that was a big deal.
Well, I think we're out of time. Nothing like ending on a shock and awe anecdote there, but congrats on the win in the Supreme Court. Fortunately, the Alliance has provided a ton more information on a number of QR codes and materials in the back on the high top, so please check that out. Again, thank you, Colin, for joining us, and thank you to the Alliance for making this program possible.
Thank you, John. And yeah, please follow us on social media and check out those QR codes for email updates.
Excellent.
Welcoming back to the stage Axios local Dallas reporter Michael Mooney.
Hello again. Before we start our final segment of the afternoon, I want to remind everybody again to subscribe to the Axios Dallas newsletter. Real estate, politics, crime, sports. We'll have you covered on everything. It'll become your favorite newsletter. It'll become your favorite email of the day. You'll learn to love it. You'll read more puns than you could possibly imagine. Let's continue on. Our next guest is District 114's representative in the Texas House, Representative John Bryant. Okay, well, let's start with how you characterize the North Texas housing affordability situation.
Well, I think you can't talk about affordable housing unless you talk about the ability of people to afford houses. And by that I mean you've got to start talking about people's income. We're in a nation now where about half of our population has no assets. That's a recent figure. We're in a situation now in which we grossly underpay large segments of our population that do great work all day long every day and then have to go and work second jobs just to get by. We cannot, as a practical matter and as a moral issue, discuss affordability unless we're also talking about whether or not we're paying people well enough. We're in a situation for the first time in our history where CEOs are making 250 and 300 times what their average workers are making. In Texas, we're 44th in spending on public education. That relates to what I'm saying now because the result is that educators and retired educators who with their families make up about 1 million people or about 1/30 of our population are paid way, way below the national average, and they cannot afford to live in such a way that an individual making an income like this can support a family. You've got to have 2 incomes. You've got to have a second job and so forth. Affordability is more than just availability of housing stock. It's more than just public policy with regard to subsidizing housing and increasing incentives for building housing. It's also about how we treat people. We have about 100,000 peace officers in our state today. If you take the 80,000 licensed peace officers and their support personnel, all the statistics indicate they're grossly underpaid as well. These people work every day. They provide essential services to us. They ought to be paid well. Now, that applies also to the employees of all of our companies around here. We have a big, huge, if you saw the paper today, we have, I think we're fourth in the country with regard to headquarters of Fortune 500 companies. These companies need to look at wages. We got to get the average wage of people up in order to have an equitable society and one in which people can afford to buy a home and raise a family in it.
So the average price of a house has gone up an enormous amount over the last couple of decades. The median income in America has gone up, but not nearly as much. I've been told, though, that millennials and Gen Z can't buy a house because we buy too many lattes and avocado toast. How do we change the conversation around these issues?
Well, I don't think the problem is millennials buying lattes. Millennials are creative, hardworking. They're you can't. I don't think you can categorize folks by these labels. The problem is we as a society have to decide what kind of government we want. Do we want a government that's active in this area and is trying to create a situation in which we have affordable housing and people who can pay the rent? Or do we want to stay completely out of it and just pretend it'll take care of itself? Texas is 49th in the nation in what it does with regard to affordable housing. Only Nebraska is beneath us. Nebraska has fewer people than we have in Dallas County. So we have to make a decision about that, and we make that decision at election time. And the last thing anybody wants to bring up at a party or at a gathering like this is politics, because we want to keep smiling and stay happy. But these are hard decisions that have to be made. And right now we have a government that's not interested in being involved, a state government that's not interested in being involved in this area.
So several bills supported by housing advocates did not do well in the legislative session that just ended. How do you think the efforts went overall?
Well, I think we get an F. I mean, I think we did accomplish virtually nothing. Again, it comes back to in Texas, it's the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. It basically, I think the largest amount of its budget is federal money that it manages according to federal programs like Section 8. We make, in spite of having a $33 billion surplus and a $27 billion rainy day fund, a savings account, we make almost no effort in this area. And we don't make much of an effort in a lot of other areas as well.
In Dallas, a lot of the discussion involves accessory dwelling units, ADUs. I think you voted against the state bill that would have loosened restrictions on ADUs, is that right?
I certainly did, yes.
And first of all, talk about what an ADU is and what's your reasoning for voting against that?
Well, ADUs means accessory dwelling units, which typically implies a house behind the main house that many homes already have, particularly older homes. But there's an effort in Austin to preempt all of the rules and regulations of city governments. They largely succeeded in one major area. They did not succeed in this area, and I was one of those that spoke out strongly against allowing this to happen. You're not going to increase affordable housing by turning a single-family residential neighborhood into a multifamily residential neighborhood by state law. You're not going to be able to generate support among our population for efforts in these areas if you take away what someone invested in, which is the right to live peaceably in a single-family home in a single-family neighborhood that's zoned so that commercial activities don't take place in your neighborhood. An accessory dwelling unit might be appropriate for some areas, particularly commercially zoned areas. It might be completely inappropriate for others. And that decision has to be made at the local level by the cities. It should not be made at the state level by state government in a process pushed by high-paid lobbyists for certain interests that would like to, for example, come to a homeowner and say, hey, if you let me put a little building in the back of your house, I'll pay for it, you'll own it, I get to lease it for 20 years, you're going to get a little extra money from my leasing, and I get to manage it. And therefore, what happens is that guy that did that company that did that, turns right around and turns it into a short-term rental unit and rents it out for the next 20 years as a commercial operation. Well, the bill that I helped stop would not allow the cities to regulate that. It would not allow the cities to interrupt or designate what kind of a lease you could put on that unit. You could end up with a no-tell motel in the next door neighbor's backyard. So that's just one extreme example. These decisions must be made at the local level. We should not be preempting the ability of cities to do what for 150 years in Texas they've always been able to do, and that's zone our neighborhoods.
If you drive around Dallas right now, you're going to see a lot of redevelopment.
Say that again?
So if you drive around Dallas right now, you're going to see a lot of redevelopment. Yeah. You're going to see a lot of East Dallas, Oak Cliff. You're going to see a lot of older apartment buildings being torn down and replaced by large, tall apartment complexes. Does that help? Does that help with affordable housing?
Well, that's a local issue specific to the neighborhood. Obviously, any increase in housing stock, real housing stock, increases the availability of places to be rented and lived in. But whether or not it's good long-term policy for the city depends on where you're doing it.
Can you see any potential problems replacing smaller, older apartments with big luxury enterprises?
Yes, gentrification is the problem. It's not, in the long run, beneficial to the city to drive out the population that's there and replace it with a higher income population and call that progress. Where are the people that left going to go and live? So we need a comprehensive look at the local level and a willingness to make plans that deal with the interest of everybody who lives here. You don't have to be rich to count. You don't have to be well-to-do to count. You can make a conscious decision that you're going to live on a lower income, for example. Or maybe your circumstances don't let you ever do any better than live on a lower income, live with a lower income. But that's up to everyone to make their own decision on that. And we should not be driving people out of neighborhoods with our policies.
Have you seen any policies that are popular among business leaders? Have you seen any policies that might have broad support that aren't being enacted?
Well, when you say business leaders, I mean, there's all kinds of people who are business leaders. Wonderful people and bad people, just like every other category of human enterprises. Yeah, we should be investing in affordable housing through the Texas Department of Community Affairs, which sends money down to the local level. We should be dealing with emergency circumstances. I introduced an amendment to add $220 million to the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. All of it was federal ARPA money, money that came down during COVID. It wasn't even a burden on the state at the state level. Of course, we didn't get that one passed in this current government that we have, this current legislature that we have, because of an aversion to government involvement in these areas. So whether you're talking about emergency rental assistance or you're talking about the long-term support for making affordable housing available through rent subsidies, all that requires a decision for the government to be involved in those areas. If you want the government to stay out of those areas, we're not going to have a solution to them. These are policy decisions.
How do you think the affordable housing situation in this region has impacted the ability to attract new businesses, right? Dallas, and Linda McMahon talked about this a little bit, but Dallas is competing with its own suburbs now. How do you think this situation that we have right now impacts the ability to draw new businesses?
Well, I think we've been competing with the suburbs the city of Dallas has failed to acknowledge that we've been competing with the suburbs for a long time. Only recently are we beginning to acknowledge it. We have a Dallas Regional Chamber that focuses on the whole region. We need a chamber that focuses on the city of Dallas and its development. I don't think at this point we're having a problem drawing people into Dallas because of a lack of housing. I think that certainly could be the case. I mean, you can look at the redevelopment into housing units of so many of our tall buildings downtown right now to see that there's plenty of opportunity for building additional housing in Dallas. I say that there's also plenty of land. Others might say, yes, but that's not a desirable place. Well, that's their judgment. We can make it what they say is an undesirable place, a desirable place with public investment.
We do like to close our Axios newsletters and our sessions with one fun thing to go. The legislative session that just ended, that seemed pretty fun. What did that, it seemed pretty slow and traditional early on and then got a little wild. What was that like from the inside? What was that like from your perspective?
Well,
and are these special sessions ever going to end?
Well, I enjoy the collegiality, so that can put a smile on my face, but we need to be producing results. I mean, we're a state of 30 million people. Our government now is no longer a government for people that make a living only in agriculture. We're a huge, essentially a nation state, and we have serious business to take care of. And the fact that we ended the session without addressing the need to improve public education, without increasing teacher salaries, this, in my view, was a major failure, and I hope one we might be able in the future, at least at election time, to cure.
Representative Bryant, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Before we wrap, I want to thank the American Property Owners Alliance for making today's event possible. I want to thank everybody who came, anybody who's watching virtually. It means an enormous amount to us to have an audience that cares about this issue. And one more time, I'm going to remind you that if you have not subscribed to Axios Dallas newsletter, please do so. And if you're not a member, consider doing that too. For as low as $50 a year, you get special newsletters, special events, special access, and I promise you'll love it. Thank you so much, everybody.